Welcome everyone to Flameless Fireside for October 24th. It's good to be with you. We have a really good plan for tonight, and it starts with Nathan. Nathan, are you there?
I am. Thank you. How's it going?
Nathan, welcome. We're glad to have you, and we're going to let you introduce yourself in just a second. First, we just want to remind everybody to keep everything muted until near the end of the podcast. We'll actually open it up for questions. But tonight, we're eventually going to get to the topic of talking about resilience in the face of adversity. But before we get there, as is our custom, we're going to get to know Nathan a little bit. And so Nathan, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, give us a little background on your life, and then maybe we'll help you get a little bit more specific as it relates to the topic as we go on. But yeah, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few minutes.
Sounds good. So let's see where to start. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I was born in Wyoming, in Casper, moved to Salt Lake when I was like 4. I believe I was almost 5. Moved to Wyoming, or moved to Salt Lake, and then grew up in Magna, just west of Salt Lake. Served a mission, went to Pittsburgh, came home, started schooling, went to the University of Utah. It took me about 6.5 years to get a bachelor's degree because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was up and down about a bunch of stuff. And ended up in Dallas about 13 years ago. Love it here. Love Texas. Yeah, there you go, Celeste. So,
I would imagine you and Celeste know each other then,
We do.
Both being Dallas, in the Dallas singles scene.
That's right.
We live so far away. She's like on the other side of the world, though, from me.
Yeah,
Texas I don't think I'm quite that far.
Well, Texas is
like
big, so there you
it's
go.
only like an hour away, I guess, right, Celeste? Something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a full hour, but
45 minutes.
It's about 45. Yeah.
Depends on who's driving.
Well, good.
That's true. If I drive, it's only 45. If Nathan drives, it's an hour. So that's how it goes.
Called out.
And Everett just reminded me, I just want to make sure everyone feels welcome. I didn't do like an official welcome. And so welcome everyone to the show. I want you to look inside your hearts and feel welcome to the show. And so Nathan, you gave us a little bit of the background. You packed a lot in there, and just, that's the short version. What stands out? When did you feel like in your life you started having, what are the experiences with adversity in your own life? Because you talked about growing up, mission, we rattle off those things, but what were those things like for you? What were the challenges?
So I would say probably during the mission, I experienced a little bit of adversity. I was not very smart and decided one day that I would pray for humility.
Oh.
I would recommend that nobody prays for humility. If you want to be humble, then pray that the Lord will be patient with you as you try to humble yourself. But if he humbles you, he'll humble you perfectly. And I learned that in the mission field. So excellent. I have not uttered that prayer since. I ended up in the one of the worst areas in our mission. I had a companion that did not want to be out. It ended up being a huge blessing, but I was humbled pretty quick. So got a Dear John letter like 2 weeks later, like all kind. I mean, it was, it was good though. It ended up good though. So
that's the place to learn. That's what I hear. Missions will teach you a whole bunch of stuff like that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else on the mission that stands out to you, even if it's something that really helped you through that adversity or helped you, taught you important lessons in life that have helped you later?
Yeah. So I am a fan of making choices early. In other words, as a kid, I don't remember if it was a deacon's quorum lesson or teacher's quorum or something, but the instructor basically told us to make decisions now. So when things come, we already know what we're going to do. We've got our decisions mapped out, type of thing. What are you going to do if someone offers you drugs? What are you going to do if someone wants premarital sex, what are you going to do? Those type of things. How are you going to handle it if you lose a parent? And so a lot of those questions I thought about, and I got serious about it. And so I think for me with trials, like I've decided that regardless of what happens, like I want to stay active in the church. I want to be on the Lord's side. And so I think that was, a decision that was made years ago. So I think that's what it is. It's again, it's committing to how you're going to respond before you're even put in the situation.
And before we get too deep into the topic, tell us a little bit more. So what happened after that mission when you got home? What's your life been like since? What are the things you've experienced in life over the last couple decades?
So I got home and I actually married a girl who was that lived in upstate New York in part of my mission. I had actually met her while I was in the mission field and was there about 7 months. And then I ended in a different area, but our mission president encouraged us to stay in contact with new converts and investigators. And so I was like, well, she's a new convert. So we were writing and
pretty,
stuff.
so I'm like, hey, I'll keep in touch with
Hey, yeah, there you go.
I was a bit motivated. Yes,
she could help me complete my lesson on humility as well.
That's right.
It's a perfect way to go, right?
Right. So anyway, I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I served, and then again, it comes up a little tip of New York, part of West Virginia and Ohio, but I was in that western third of Pennsylvania most of the time. But so anyways, we got married pretty quickly. And the biggest trial, I would say, within the first couple of years of our marriage was when we found out that she couldn't have kids naturally. And it shook her a lot more than me, but it was pretty devastating news.
Yeah.
I'm 23 years old at the time and, maybe almost 24. And I'm like, that's, I had envisioned having kids since I was a kid, 13, 14 years old. I'm like, man, I can't wait to be a dad. That looks fun, whatever. And so that was, a pretty tough trial at the time. And we were married for a few years and then found that out. And then, she really had a hard time with it. We ended up separating, and I found out so we were separated, and then she ended up, there was a random shooting in Salt Lake. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but she was at a mall at Trolley Square, and she ended up being killed at Trolley Square while we were separated. And I had to find out from her sister after her death that she was indeed unfaithful, and it just it was a tough trial to go through.
I am so sorry, Nathan.
Wow. And so so you're dealing, like in your 20s, you're already dealing with sort of like, dreams lost like early, like the idea of having kids, and then the idea of reconciling or any kind of, working it out with her, just removed by what happened, in that incident. How did you go from there? What happened?
So after her death, we were separated for like a year and maybe 3 or 4 months, something like that. Maybe it's almost a year and a half. And the whole time I was hanging on to false hope and thinking that things would work out, and she was just going through a phase or, whatever. So I kept hope that, my temple marriage would remain intact and all my covenants and all that. And being naive at the time, thinking that if we're separated, it's on both of us to make this work, and that, together you're, both at fault and everything. And obviously to a point, both parties are at fault, but, I took some of the responsibility, even though it wasn't really, if it was up to me, we would have saved the marriage, but everything turned out to be a blessing. But after she passed away, I started seeing the Lord's hand a lot in my life. And, I was able to finally take a deep breath. But there was times where, like, going through that separation, I remember one time, so I worked at 4 a.m, and I had this nosy neighbor, and she called me and said, "Hey, just so you know, there's a white van parked at your house. It doesn't, it looks a little suspicious." And so I was like, I'll go check this out. So I went and showed up to my house and walked in at 1:30 in the morning, 2 a.m, whatever it was, and found that my ex was with, some dude in the bedroom. And at this point, she told me, I was upset and angry at the time, and yelling as I'm leaving the house, and, you're cheating and all this stuff. And she denied it. And I wanted to believe everything she was saying. So I didn't believe. So I mentioned earlier that I didn't realize she was unfaithful till her sister told me, but anybody could see the writing on the wall. I guess I was naive and innocent and didn't want to believe that, she would ever do that. And anyway, I was 28 at the time. And anyway, so
I mean, if you can deny it with the guy in your bedroom, that and get believed, that, I mean, that's kind of, that's amazing.
So,
so she was pretty brazen.
They had just fallen asleep together. It was innocent, and he was, going to go home, but they fell asleep, and nothing happened. And anyway, so I bought that hook, line, and sinker, of course.
Well, you're going to want to think the best of your wife, but I'm curious, do you think that, because there's a lot of stress that comes with infertility, especially within the church, because we're so focused on building families and eternal families and having 20 kids and the minivan and, the whole thing, right? So did you see a shift in her? And we don't want to speak ill of the dead, so we just keep it kind of general, but did you see kind of a shift in her when she realized she was infertile prior than before? Do you think that might have took her down a spiral of sorts in her life?
It absolutely did. Right after I found out about her infertility, her dad actually got cancer, and he passed away, months after finding out that he had cancer. And so that really took a toll on her as well. And so, that's why I thought it was just a real tough time for her, that she would get through this, that she would, straighten out priorities, whatever. And every, we'd come back and have a stronger marriage than ever type of thing. And so, it was really, really a hard time for her. And so she explained to me that sitting in church next to all these couples that were having children was, it was about the hardest thing that she could do. That was part of the reason she started disliking church, and there was starting to be a disconnect there. But I remember the day she found out she couldn't have kids, I had come home I don't remember if I was coming home from work or school, but she was on the couch, and all the blood was gone from her face. Like, she was white. She thought I was going to walk in, hear the news, and start packing. I was leaving. It was done. Like, there was nothing she could do. And so she kind of carried that for the remainder of our marriage, that she just, she had this sense that I didn't love her anymore, and that, it wasn't going to work and all this stuff. And I said, no, this is an us problem, not a you problem,
But it's hard when you're the one who has the issue, right? So, because I've been there. So yes, it was an us problem between me and my ex as well. But it was really my problem. I'm trying to say, I was the issue. He wasn't the issue. And so there's a lot of burden that comes with that. And it's not a good place to be. It's a hard, difficult place to be. And I'm sorry that, first of all, y'all had to deal with that, because it's not easy. And I can totally relate to not wanting to go to church, to not wanting to engage in any way, because you're kind of like, I'm a good person. People are out having abortions left and right. People are getting their kids taken away, even incidences where they're killing their own kids. Why am I, who is striving to live the gospel, not being blessed with a child? Like, it's really hard to kind of wrap your brain around when sometimes our culture teaches you do the good things and you get blessed, right? They don't kind of
Right.
really focus on the fact, well, there's also biology. You're born a certain way. Like, there's certain things that just happen that we have to kind of accept. But our culture teaches kind of just the opposite, that the Lord can do anything and whatever. So to be someone who kind of accepted that culture at the beginning, because I was kind of new to be active in the church, it was hard because I was kind of like, what did I do wrong? Why am I getting like blamed or not receiving the blessings that everyone else is receiving? So I don't know. It's a hard thing. I can't imagine it, and to where how it affected your guys' marriage. It's super sad. I'm so sorry.
It was really hard. And although, I was sad along with her, I was 26, 27, 25. I can't even remember how old I was. About 25, I think, when we found out, maybe even as early as 24. And I had about as much empathy as a rock at that point in my life. Just didn't, like,
Yeah.
like I had a great childhood. And so for me to even pretend like I understood hard times or anything like that, at this point, like it was nil. Like I was probably zero help to her, doing the best I could at the time, obviously with the knowledge that I had, but I was probably pretty hard to live with at that point. I don't know, because I wasn't understanding or, empathic or anything, even a little bit.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
kind of the majority of us, though, in our 20s, that's kind of a learned thing. At least I like to think so.
And that's the thing. It wasn't due to a lack of wanting to
yeah.
care and to love. It's just you were inexperienced.
Right.
You hadn't experienced life, and boy, it's like you really went deep fast in your adulthood, didn't you?
Yeah.
Into that deep, hard lessons of life kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it was a hard time. I remember right after, finding some dude at my house, I was driving. I worked in North Salt Lake at the time. And again, I worked at 4 a.m, but I could go in as early as 3, 2:30, whenever. Of course, I never did that. But on this night, I was like, you know what? I'm up. I got to go somewhere. I got to do something. So I remember specifically driving down 215, and I was thinking, you know what? If I totally undid my seatbelt and ran into one of these, piers in the middle of the road, no one could prove it was suicide. I wouldn't leave a note. I could just go quietly, or so I was thinking at the time. I'm like, I could just be done with this whole thing right now, in 30 seconds, just by driving, 2 seconds really, just by driving my car off the road. And so you can tell kind of how dark it was at the time for me, because I was like, you know what? I'd rather not be living than go through this right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can relate. I've been there where I was like, and it was actually to do with the whole infertility. And I was just like, I wasn't like planning anything, but I remember thinking, you know what? If I died right now, I'd be okay with that. I remember feeling that, like, and I was at peace. I was like, Lord, if you want to take me now, I'm good. I'm good to go. So yeah, sometimes those trials can bring us to a really deep low. So how did you overcome? So obviously your first wife passed away, and where did you go from there?
So after she passed, it was the most amazing burden lifted. Like it was almost overnight. And I had been grieving our marriage for a year and a half. And so, it probably looked insensitive again. I'm 28 years old and I just lost my wife. And yet the grieving was already done. Like I've already lost her. Right. And so at her death, absolutely, I'm sad and everything like that. But it was a burden lifted. Like the Lord, he was going to take care of her. He was going to take care of me. This didn't have to be my worry or my trial anymore. I could just let it go, just let him have it. And so, it was a huge burden lifted. And So that kind of propelled me into 4 or 5 months later, in the summer of this would have been summer of 07. I have a buddy that I'm working with at Sky West that's kind of been my counselor. Really, I'm getting free counseling from him. He's a psych major or doing something, and I'm going to him, and basically he's a sounding board. I say I was getting free counseling, but he was more of a sounding board than anything. But him and I got pretty close. He meets a girl from Plano, Texas, and he's getting married down here and invites me to the wedding. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going down to Plano. I can fly for free. I've been invited by, we weren't great friends, but I'm like, well, that's nice that he thought of me, and I have no reason not to go. So I flew down here, went to the wedding, and I was like, you know what? I might as well go do a session before the wedding starts, before the sealing starts. And so I was planning on getting up and going to the temple, and it turned out I actually stayed with a friend from high school down here, her and her husband, and we got to talking the next morning. And so I didn't get to the session that I had planned on. I ended up getting to the temple a little bit later. And so I ended up meeting. So while I was at the temple, I'm in the ordinance room, and I'm prompted to talk to this girl. I noticed a girl in there. She was with her mom and everything. And I'm prompted to talk to this girl. And I'm like, no, that's the last thing I want to do is start a relationship, or even I'm not interested at all at this point in doing this whole thing again. So I'm like, no. And of course, just like with anything.
Which is another way of saying yes.
Which is like, you can't say no in the temple. The Lord's like, really?
Yeah, in the temple, you
No
have
in
to
the
say
temple?
and that's exactly what it was, is that feeling got so strong, like, no, you're not in charge. But what's funny is I had a new roommate at the time, and he'd never been married, and he was about 27, and I was teasing him, that because he was so picky and cautious and all this stuff. And I'm teasing him that, hey, if there was one specific person for you, she already got hit by a bus, so you might as well just marry the next best thing. And so I remember saying that to him, and at the time he was dating a woman with kids. And I said to him a couple of things. I said, okay, first of all, I will never date somebody that has kids. And secondly, I don't remember how it came up, but I said, I will never live in the South. You couldn't force me to live in the South. Well, of course, God has a sense of humor, right? Because so I'm in the ordinance room, and I'm prompted to talk to this girl, and I am not interested. And of course, as I'm pushing back heavenly, it's just like I couldn't even sit in my chair still. And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? Get up in the middle of this session and walk across the room and start talking to her? Like, so finally my nerves calmed a little bit, because I kind of agreed, like, okay, when we're on the other side of the veil, I'll talk to her. So sure enough, we get over there, and I start talking to her. Everything lines up. I give her my, we exchange numbers, whatever, and we start chatting and everything starts to line up. We end up engaged and everything. Like, just for instance, it's 2008, and the housing market has just taken a dive, like, if you remember back in 2008. And yeah. I was told that there's no way I could sell my townhouse for months, and I'd have to lower the price 3 or 4 times, all this stuff. Well, it sold for full price in 5 days. It was, my realtor was shocked. But that was one, instance of the Lord wanted me in Texas. Right. And so anyway, so I end up moving here. We get married. Things are so perfect for so long. Like, I'm on my knees all the time, thanking Heavenly Father for his blessings. Like, wow, this is what a real marriage looks like. This is awesome. Like, I'm on cloud 9, like, for the next few years. And, so it was a nice little, vacation, I guess, from the last, like, huge trial for a little while. And so anyway.
So how many kids do you have?
So we ended up we had a honeymoon baby. My son was born in 2009 in May. We were married in August of 2008. He was born in May. And then she got pregnant while she was breastfeeding him, didn't think that it would happen. She had 2 kids from her first marriage. I should mention that because I mentioned to my roommate, right, that I would never marry or date a girl with kids, and I would never live in the South. So here I am now, right? Here I am now in the South, and I'm married to this girl that has 2 kids. And, they became mine pretty quick. I mean, they were 5 and 2 when we got married. And so they were young and, anyway, we developed a great bond. But so anyways, what was the question? I can't even remember.
I said, how many kids do you have?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, so I've got the 2 boys. The one was a honeymoon baby, and then she's breastfeeding and doesn't think she can gets pregnant with the next one. She's very upset that she gets pregnant that fast. But anyway, I couldn't have been happier. I was on cloud 9, thanking the Lord for my blessings. So I had these 2 amazing boys, and then things started to change.
But how did it go? How did it go after that?
So it was great for a while. And then what's interesting is my brother was living in Hawaii at the time. And I went out there. We did a bros trip. I went out there and we ended up going on this hike on the Nepali coast. If you're familiar with Kauai.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah. It was amazing. Like it was a lot of fun. But while I was there, I didn't have service for like 3 days. And I didn't think that, I mean, we were talking a small island. If you have service anywhere, you'd think you'd have it everywhere. But I didn't have service for like 3 days. And so I couldn't get a hold of my ex at all. And so she was, I don't know if it was abandonment issues or what, but she was not impressed at all. And literally, like, it's hard for people to believe, but that literally was the beginning basically of the downfall of our marriage. It rocked her. It
almost sounds like a trauma for her, like almost like just something that really rocked her world, maybe brought up some old stuff from earlier in her life. And so it sounds like she just wasn't able to recover from that.
Yeah. And that, it was unfortunate. Then, so on top of that, a month later or something like that, I ordered a painting from Deseret Book, and it was the Bountiful Temple where her and I ended up getting married. Well, Deseret Book has my old information on it. So they ship it to me and the name of my first wife.
Oh,
so that shows up while I'm at work. Okay.
Oh,
and so I thought I'd get this thing, bring it in. She wasn't, one to check the porch all the time or whatever. So they must have knocked or something, but she gets this and she is none too pleased, as you can imagine and understand.
I don't see what the problem is.
I don't see an issue either, but I honestly don't see an issue with that. I'd be like, well, yeah, information.
Yeah.
Well, she had thought that I ordered it and that I was, that I was stupid enough to order it and put her name on it, but it was just an account. It was an account that I had where we were both on the account. So it ships, so it was completely innocent on my part. Like, I didn't call him and say, hey, make sure you put my first wife's name on it type of thing.
Yeah.
So it ships like that, and it ships to me and her. And, obviously my new wife at the time was not impressed. And, I don't blame her, but she had trouble believing that, this was an account I had from years past. We were on the account together. Like, I didn't, specifically say, oh, by the way, make sure you ship it to me and my new wife. And her name, by the way, is the name of my first wife. I didn't, none of that happened.
I think somebody brought up, if someone is, sensitive enough that those kinds of things are really rocking their world, I think most people who are in a secure relationship and feeling really good about themselves aren't going to be thrown off by that. Like they're going to immediately, it'll register with them. Like, yeah, how in the world is he supposed to know that they're going to use the old name on the account? But obviously it sounds like there was stuff going on in her leading up to this, where these incidents had a much more devastating effect on her than they normally would in other circumstances. Does that make sense?
Well,
Yeah. And
I'm going to add something to this as well, John. I'm just going to say that I think effective communication also is a huge factor with this. If she would have just said, or she would have known what really was bothering her. And that's part of the key, is knowing, hey, maybe I do have an issue with this, but let me communicate it and then we can work it out together. I think a lot of people fail to do that at
Right.
times.
It seems like it came out that she was upset, but that there was just no reassuring her.
Right.
Is that true, Nathan?
yeah, and I would say it was interesting, like looking back, I was insensitive to hints, and I didn't get any of that stuff. So with both of them, I noticed some similarities in communication, meaning that they both wanted me to know things that I didn't have a clue about, or to care about things that I really didn't care about. I think sometimes, at least for those two gals, it seemed to me like I was supposed to understand how to love them without them communicating that to me.
You're supposed to be a mind reader, Nathan. It is. All men are supposed to read women's minds.
I can't even read my own mind. So that's
I do
Right.
want to point out though one thing. If my husband went on a vacation to Hawaii and I didn't hear for 3 days, I would have been freaked out. No doubt, freaked out, panicked. It would not have been a good thing. But obviously it wouldn't have been a downfall. But I can relate. She probably really was scared to death and freaking out. But if she did have root issues with like security and abandonment, then that could have triggered that greater response. But I can imagine I would have been so freaked out if you had left and I didn't hear from you for 3 days. So
I think a way to avoid that is to know that your phone may not work, and be educated about it, and try to prepare for that, hey, I might not be available for a few days, while I'm out there, because I'm going to be in remote areas,
right.
It's almost like, but you would hope that you could recover.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And that inability to recover, I think, is really hard.
Right.
But definitely fierce masculine presence can make a big difference. I mean, being able to really get in touch with, not mind reading, but just being really in touch with what the other person is going through. The problem is that's a lot to ask of a 20-something-year-old guy, who's still trying to figure it out himself. And, if only we could learn the lessons we know in our 50s and 60s and apply them in our 20s and 30s, how much better would life be, right?
So the question is, Nathan, have you figured out how to read a woman's mind?
I have not, but I
For your
have
next
figured
life?
out the importance of asking her what's on her mind.
Good.
It seems to me like somebody told me this. It was a close friend told me that it doesn't matter how much you love her, and it doesn't matter how much she loves you. What really matters is how she feels about herself when she's in your presence. And that was kind of like an aha moment where I was like, oh, that makes sense, because, I see all these couples that are so happy, and like the woman can't wait to be around her husband, and she's excited when he comes home, and there's no anxiety, and is the house clean enough, or are the kids all bathed, or whatever. Like, she's not worried about that. She's just so excited to get him home because of how he makes her feel. If she's had a bad day and she's got that bond with him and he knows how to ask the right questions, that's the thing. It's that I've learned anyway, and maybe women can straighten me out, but that women love to be asked what's on their mind, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, getting like on the emotional level with them. And so, that's
Well,
something
and to really be in tune with that when they answer.
I will say for me though, I'm not an emotional person. So if you ask those questions to me, it's going to throw me in a tailspin because I'm just
Terry's
like,
just kind of weird that way, but no, I'm just kidding.
I have a bubble. I don't hug John. Like,
Right?
I need to go on.
Oh,
And I'm more the type that I will just sit and ask questions and pretty much tell you how I'm feeling. So I'm pretty much an open book. I will share pretty much everything. But I do know that a lot of women, I don't really relate to it. I really don't understand the concept behind it, but they do expect men to kind of ask them what's on their mind. And so they'll get all upset and kind of riled up. And then they're waiting to be asked what's wrong versus just getting upset and being like, hey, this is why I'm upset, and communicating it. But yeah, I mean, I think for a majority of women, it would be a benefit for men to be like, okay, hey, how are you doing? In the moment, how are you feeling? What's going on? Trying to get that information out of them. It would definitely probably benefit the relationship.
And I will say also, sometimes when I do that, I'm not ready to address it at that moment because I have to collect my thoughts.
There is truth.
right. Right.
So
Well,
I'll be honest with that.
I think the key here is just reach out to each other. If one of you is kind of guarded and doesn't talk, try to stretch yourself and be more open. And if one of you just is clueless and not as in tune with the other one, look for ways to be more aware of what they're going through without them having to spell it all out for you.
Right.
And if you're both reaching toward each other that way, most things tend to resolve themselves pretty well,
Yeah.
But Nathan, you did the best you could, at the time. And I think that's what most of us are doing. We're trying to do, I look back on my life, and if I had known what I know now, probably half of the things that went south wouldn't have. But, I almost needed those life lessons to get to where I am now, and so I don't want to second guess that journey too much.
Yeah. And I've learned that I have to be, give myself a little leeway and compassion because, again, I always tried to do the best that I did the best I could for the knowledge I had at the time. Like after my first relationship failed and, I got married and it was a godsend. And I met this girl in the temple and everything. Like I told Heavenly Father, like, I want to do this right. Like, I don't want to make the same mistakes. I remember in my first marriage, I was more impatient and, not understanding at all and all those things. So I did not want to make those mistakes again. And I talked to a few people and they're like, dude, you went to Hawaii you didn't talk to her for 3 days while you're like on an island with women that are all over the beaches and all this stuff and I'm like, yeah, that was probably not good, but the thing is like, she helped me pack for my hike. Like I brought hiking boots out and all that stuff. She knew I was going to be on a hike. I didn't know that I wouldn't have service. And I don't know that she knew I wouldn't have service, but it threw her, it kind of threw her off where I'm looking at it like, I'm on a hiking trip. You knew I was coming, those type of things. And anyway, I
think the temptation is concerns. I think the temptation for guys sometimes is to try to, just explain it all or come up with excuses and that kind of thing. And to me, that just can make it worse. Sometimes I think it's better to just communicate very little and just say, listen, it may have been better if I anticipated that I wouldn't be within, phone contact, but, I did the best I could and I'm back now and everything went really well. I had an amazing time. And now I just want to make sure you're okay. And then at that point, to go through all the little things, because, someone who's hurt like that, what I've found is that they, if they're determined to be hurt, the more explaining we do can actually drive them further into that cycle, actually, and so, and sometimes we feel shame over things that are just, it's really ridiculous when you think about it. Going to Hawaii and spending time with your brothers is not a shameful act, No. And her panic is understandable if she's had a history and, with people who have abandoned her, but that doesn't mean shame in me isn't going to fix that in her. In a way, my shame can distract me from being there for her. And so, but these are things, you learn over a lifetime, and, that they teach in therapy and that kind of stuff. I don't expect most people to just, oh, if only I had just kind of gotten out of my shame and been there for her. We don't know that stuff, and it sounds like you did the best you could at the time. And maybe this is a good segue into getting into the topic for the day. What are some of the things, it sounds like you've had your share, maybe even a little extra of adversity, at least in your adult life, Nathan. And what are some of the things that you have gained, from those experiences, those setbacks?
Yeah. So I think it started when I first got separated. I found a ton of peace when I went to the temple. And so, when my first wife and I separated, I went to the Jordan River Temple sometimes, 2-3 times a week. And I just, I loved that temple, and I was there a lot, and I found a lot of peace. And, I'd get to the point where I'd be in the celestial room, just praying, just pondering, whatever. And I found myself not even wanting to leave. Like, I don't even want to get back to real life and face, hurt and I got this small window of peace in my life. I don't even want to leave this. And so I think a lot of healing took place, like, in the temple. And so when my second wife basically told me we were separating and things, it threw me into the biggest tailspin, because we had so many answers, both of us, that, we were supposed to be married. For instance, after I met her in the temple, she actually went back and she was praying about whether or not she should date me or pursue me, or how, I don't remember the wording exactly. I think it was pursue me. And a brother, I'm friends with him to this day. He was in town for business, and he was from the Kansas area. He was in the stake presidency at the time or something, but just really a neat guy. He's really in tune and whatever. While she's praying in the celestial room about whether or not she should date me, he approaches her and says, "Whatever you're praying about, the answer is yes." Out of the blue. Like, who solicits that type of, like that's just, you don't do that unless you're prompted to, right? Well, my ex feels the spirit go from her head to her toes, as she describes it. So I think that was why that was part of why being separated from her and the potential of divorce was so hard for me, because I had not only bonded with her on an emotional level, but a spiritual level as well. It was just everything. Like I said, everything lined up. We knew we were supposed to be married and everything. And so it was a rough time. We get separated, and a month and a half later, I find out my dad has leukemia. A month and a half after that, he passes away. And then, weeks after that, I find out why we're separated to begin with, and that she's been unfaithful. And so now I'm going through this being, cheated on all over again. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, and so at this point, I'm not shaking my fist at God, but I'm like, why in the world would you do me wrong the second time? I understand I needed to go through this the first time, but you specifically brought me to Texas to go through this again, knowing what the outcome would be. It was really, really hard for me to swallow. And I didn't feel like anger on the surface. Like, I didn't wake up and think, oh, I'm mad at God today or whatever. But there was some deep hurt and pain and some anger that I didn't even realize or recognize that I had at the time. And so it was, I'm going through that. I felt like when my dad passed away, I didn't even really grieve his passing, because I was grieving my marriage and not seeing my kids every day anymore, and going through the whole, like, living in a house by myself, and when I've got kids and all this stuff that mind you, I was so grateful to have, because I found out I couldn't have kids, in the first marriage. so to have my kids ripped away, basically how I felt, it was really, really hard time. It was an intense hard time. And so I think, again, the only thing I knew at the time, and that was to pray and go to the temple. And so I was praying like crazy. I was going to the temple, and I remember after a couple years, maybe it wasn't even a couple years, maybe it was a year and a half or something. We were separated for a year working out the divorce. And then once we got divorced, it was a year or so after that. So about 2 years after we got separated, I was at the temple and I was praying, and I opened up the scriptures right to 2 Peter or maybe it's First Peter 4:12, that basically says, think it not strange, this trial that is to try you as though some strange thing happened to you. And it floored me, like, because at this point I felt strange. I'm the only dude I know that's been through 2 relationships where I was cheated on twice, lost my dad at the time. Like I was the only one that I could think of or knew that had been through those type of things. And so I was feeling sorry for myself, but also kind of, again, I had that little anger at God. Like, why would you have me go through this? I prayed. Not only did I not only was I not looking for somebody at the time, but you like basically told me, no, you're moving to Texas and you're marrying this girl. And so it was, it wasn't one of those, where I saw red flags and I just kind of ignored them or what. It wasn't like that at all. Like, everything lined up. I just knew we were supposed to be together. And so it was really hard for me in that trial to that was the hardest part of it, was trying to get over the fact that God would have me.
So tell me that scripture one more time.
I think
what did it say again?
It says, think it not strange, this fiery trial that is to try you as though some strange thing happened unto you. Because, and that's exactly how I felt. Like,
right.
It just floored me, because it's like the moral obviously is quit feeling self-pity. Like, this isn't strange. Everybody goes through trials. You're not unique. You're not special.
I think it's important to note too that God actually may guide us into experiences in life, not to punish us. I think we automatically, when something's hard, we say he's punishing me for something, when in reality, it's almost like, I've seen, you see these karate movies or something and they'll literally like put the students who are learning karate, like in situations where they have to fight their way out, kind of thing, to toughen them up. I'm thinking of a Marvel movie not long ago, where it's kind of like, I'm actually going to put you in harm's way for you because I know you have the skills to get out of it. And I want you to develop character, and we say, well, that's, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say,
I was just going to say today, I taught a lesson. Wait a minute.
Oh my
There's
goodness.
lag time.
Anyway, I taught a lesson today, and it's interesting how some things in one part of a day will apply to later in the day. But it was actually a talk by Elder Razban from last April, and he talked about this. He talked about how we pray for miracles, but then we're disappointed in how they show up in our lives. And he said the Lord might want to fulfill miracles for us, but he wants to do it on his timeline and in the way that he wants, knowing what will be for our greatest benefit. And so he may provide the miracle, but it's 5 years later, or he may provide the miracle, but first he gives us a trial. And, it's just, I think sometimes we try to micromanage how that miracle has to show up. This person has to be healed. This marriage has to be saved. This life has to be turned around. And in reality, what it comes down to is I got to let people have their free agency. And at the same time, I got to allow things to happen in a way that teach you, even if it's in a way that's the opposite of what you wanted.
Okay. So I'm glad you brought up free agency, because I kind of have a different take on this. So this is my thought. I don't know if the Lord leads us into those type of trials. I think he allows those type of trials to enter our life, because I'm not convinced, because I feel like I had a confirmation I was supposed to marry my ex too. But I don't think that this is how it was supposed to end up. I think that agency within that time frame that was taken by my ex is what caused the outcome. I don't believe that it was meant to end this way, but I believe the Lord allowed it, knowing the outcome, because I could learn from it. I don't think, Nathan, that the Lord put you in that situation for you to teach you. I think
Well,
that
and to me,
it was allowed.
I
Like the
think it's
Lord doesn't usually put us in those situations when it's when it's someone else's agency.
And I'm
Right.
going to add something to this really
Yeah.
quick.
If it's our own choices, absolutely, he'll throw crap in our way all day. But when it's something that's someone else's choice, he allows it to come into our life, and then we can use that as a benefit to learn, and we can use that as an experience. Terry.
Okay. So I actually did not get a confirmation when I was marrying my ex-husband. I literally, the wedding day, I was standing there. Of course, everybody knows I'm a convert. I was standing there, but I'm very spiritual. I was standing there and I'm going to cry.
All right, go for it, girl. Let it out.
Go, girl, go.
I was standing there and I said, I can't do this. And my dad said, you can do this. And I was like, how can I do this if I do not feel this to my core? And he said, because sometimes there are lessons that are greater than we even realize. The lessons I learned in my terrible marriage were humbling. They gave me 2 wonderful gifts, and it taught me more about my own strength and that I really am not selfish. It taught me a lot about myself.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we forget that.
Yep.
Yep. I think those trials, I would never, and I've said this 1,000 times, I would never relive what I've gone through the last 7-8 years. Never.
Yeah.
Or would want to, I guess. But I would never want to lose what I've learned. I would never want to lose the progress I've made as a person, the things that have changed me and shaped me. Granted, again, I don't believe that the Lord put this trial in my path. I believe it was chosen by my ex's agency, but he allowed it.
Yeah.
And he helped me and he carried me and he said, Celeste, this is unfair to you, but you know what? This unfairness, use it for your benefit.
Right.
Take that, use it, and create it into something that is good, even though you're going through a whole bunch of crap.
And it also taught me how to be more compassionate with my children too, in all situations and all aspects. This last week tried me as a parent big time.
Yeah.
And I mean, it literally taught me how to handle these situations by myself.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I think we're, I don't want to try to mind read God for sure. I think it'd be easier to just mind read women than him. But I would say that whether he allows it or he encourages it or whatever, I really believe that he's a very protective being, and that I don't know, I've had times in my life where I've avoided some really serious problems and he just flat out told me, do not go there. And I listened and it saved me a lot of trouble. But I really felt like I was guided into these relationships that have been really devastating in many ways. And I think it's because of that. I think it's these very lessons where he says, I could tell them to not do this, or I may actually encourage them to do this. Whether he encourages or allows, in the end, I think that he wants us to have the life experience, and he knows that just because it's adversity doesn't mean that it's not necessary. And I'll be honest with you, I look back on some of these experiences I've had in marriage, and I have to admit, I hate it. I hate to admit it. I couldn't have learned those lessons in any other way. I wish that I had been more humble, or that I had been more, open to those lessons in easier ways. But man, they got taught to me so well and so deeply that I will never forget. And that was the only way I was going to figure it out. And I have to, even though I cussed him out in the middle of it, I have to look at God now and say, thank you so much. Thank you so much for caring enough about me to prune me back like the,
and I think sometimes, I know for me, sometimes I look at it as a parent, right? Like, as a parent, I know my child's going to go in and make a horrible decision for them, but I'm not going to tell them, hey, maybe you should reconsider this, because that's their choice. It's their free agency. It's a lesson that they need to learn. And then when they come to me and they say, gosh, I really shouldn't have done that, I'm like, well, what did you learn from it? And I feel kind of like that is how he guides us at times, you know?
I think for me, like, okay, I read a book recently called Remembering Wholeness. And this author, what's her name? I can't remember her name, but anyways, this author talks about how a lot of our trials we agreed to before we would come to this earth. And we knew what the outcomes would be on, big, huge, life-changing trials, right? Like God didn't just put a veil over our heads and say, and send us saying, well, good luck figuring out what your trial is going to be type of thing when you go down there. I think that a lot of people, agreed to their trials and I do think it's an individual thing where, sometimes, I don't believe that the Lord expects things to be, to turn out a certain way, what I'm trying to, hold on, let me rephrase that. I think the Lord obviously knows everything that's going to happen. And it's not like we can surprise God and say, oh, well, I'm going to go kill somebody. I'm going to use my agency and go kill somebody and see if God anticipated that.
He already knew that.
He knew that was going to happen. And so that was my struggle in my trial is he knew the outcome of what was going to happen. So I felt trifled with because, I didn't surprise him. My ex didn't surprise nothing, nothing got by him. Like, well, that was supposed to be a good marriage, but evidently these two couldn't no, he knew, that, and here's the thing. I've come to peace with the fact that maybe that trial was every bit of my kid's trial growing up with divorced parents as it was my trial, or whatever. And so anyway, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you another question. And that just is, I love the meme, I never lose, I either win or I learn. If you learn from it, it can make those trials understandable. You know what I mean? It makes them more meaningful. And so what are the lessons? What did you learn about yourself? And what did you learn about relationships from those experiences that you had, Nathan?
So after I was separated the first time and said I would never, go through this failed marriage stuff again, I was getting my hands on stuff like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, different books I was reading to try and I was reading them to learn and to study and to find out how to be married better and all these things. But what I learned in those types of books is, wow, I guess I am normal. Like I'm not the only man that can't read minds. I'm not the only man that doesn't want to, clean the house all the time. I'm not the only man that doesn't, those type of things. And so it was, but then doing it again, I'm like, holy smokes. I was reading books on, win back your wife and divorce busting, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to fix this. This is going to, this is easy. I'll just change and everything will be great. I'll make her happy again. And I did change, but it wasn't, it just, I didn't know at the time, that she'd indeed been unfaithful and had no desire to even be part of the church anymore or anything like that. But I learned a ton about relationships. I learned a ton about communication. I watched a marriage seminar by a guy named Mark Gungor, and he does maybe some of you have heard of
that
it.
That guy's freaking hilarious.
The Tale of Two Brains. Yeah. So I watched that 4 or 5 times and just took notes. And anyway, he's awesome. But, getting my hands on things. There was a marriage seminar at a local, I don't know if it was some non-denominational church or something. I can't remember, but it was Kirk Cameron doing this marriage seminar. And I'm like, that's close to my house. That sounds good. So I went to that. Like I was I was doing everything I could to learn how to be married, how to be a man and a husband. What do I need to change? What do I need to do differently, type of thing. And so I was getting my hands on a lot of stuff. And
Okay.
even at one point, like my ex had me convinced that I was a narcissist. And so I'm praying for charity and how do I change? Like, how do I become more empathic and all this stuff? And then of course we find out that, she's sleeping around and I'm like, well, okay. I thank you for, making me worry about that for the last little while. But anyway,
well, let me
It
call
sounds
time
like
out
you
real
have a
quick.
lot of experience preparing for your next wife, right? So it sounds like you've got a lot under your belt now. You've got all these seminars and reading books and all this stuff that's going to make you like this fabulous husband. So, and I do know that you've got this trail of ladies that are trying to always catch you and they just can't seem to not. So what exactly are you looking for? So I know, because I know you've got options. So what is it you're looking for?
Hey, Celeste, before
that's an
he
interesting
answers that,
segue.
hey, Nathan, can
Yeah.
I just mention something really fast to just a therapist observation? Because I see the struggle in trying to be the good man, so to speak. And I hope everyone out there understands something very, very important. And that just is, most of the self-help books and things are written for relationships where both people are relatively healthy, just so you know, where both people are securely attached and able to respond well to healthy behavior from the other. In situations involving like personality disorders, trauma, PTSD and mental illness, this not only may not work, it may actually backfire on you. I want you to think of healthy behavior as having two effects. If you have a healthy partner, it will draw you closer. If you have a toxic partner, it will actually drive you apart. And that could actually be a good thing, Go
agree
ahead.
100%. Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say I agree.
No.
100%.
I know
It's what I've learned, and I don't want to badmouth anybody, but what I've learned is it is easier to be married to a narcissist than to be divorced from one.
I've actually heard that. So
I'm not kidding. I'm not
I've
kidding
heard
at all.
that's the case.
Yes, especially if you
okay.
have children with them.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
When you don't, you can go no contact, and that's a blissful experience right there. So,
all right.
But anyway, go back to Celeste's question.
Nathan, what you looking for?
What are you looking for?
Okay, so
I like how you clear his throat first.
He's like, okay, I'm going to tell you
I'm
my
like,
list
okay,
because
I
it's
gotta
a mile
get ready here.
long
Like,
and no one
there's
here
this long
qualifies.
Hang on, let me get the list back.
That's right.
Fidelity.
It's funny because after like probably a year after divorce, I thought I was ready to date like immediately. Like I think it was the week I finalized, I think I went out on a date and I had no business dating. 2 years go by and I'm like, oh, I'm ready now. No business dating. Like it took me a while. And I don't even, I feel like now I'm finally ready after 6 years. But for the first, I thought 3 years later, oh, that's plenty of time. I know so many people that are divorced and remarried within a year and a half or 2 years or whatever. I'm like, oh, I'm ready now for sure. No, I had no business. And so, but anyways, when I first got divorced, I'm like, I'm not doing this again. I'm not doing this a third time. I'm like, there's no way lightning can strike in the same place 3 times in a row. This isn't going to happen again. Logically, I'm thinking that, but my heart's like, don't you dare do anything stupid or, So anyways, so I had this list of like 44 things on it, has to have a strong testimony, has a good relationship with her dad, doesn't have any past traumas. Like I basically like wrote out this list of a woman that doesn't exist. Right. And so you
might want to get that down to maybe 10 or I don't know.
I decided, I'm not looking for a list anymore. I'm looking for somebody that's healthy and, those type of things. So, I was talking to a guy a few years ago, and he was like, I just want four things. I want somebody healthy spiritually. I want somebody healthy emotionally. I want somebody healthy physically, and I want somebody healthy financially. And if you give me those four things, I can be happy. And so I was like, okay, well, spirituality for me is going to include 10 bullet points. And so my list stayed big, but I'm like, at least I got four categories, right? I'm like, anyway. So to answer your question, what am I looking for? Like, I think mainly number one, like I'm looking for somebody that has a really, really strong testimony and has learned some things. You know, somebody asked me recently, could I date somebody in their 20s? And I'm like, I was an idiot when I was 20. I'm like, and granted, women mature, generally speaking, I'm speaking generally, I think women mature faster than men. But I'm like, I don't know if I want to be married to somebody that hasn't really experienced hard times or can even relate to those type of experiences. Right. And so, you know, so I don't know. I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. I just know that like a testimony and a commitment to the gospel and to the Lord Jesus Christ basically is that's at the top. And then everything else after that, like, is a bonus. You know, obviously I'm not looking for, you know, in those categories, I'm not looking for somebody that has, you know, all different types of mental illness and, you know, those type of things. And anyway, so that's a good question. And by the way, Celeste, since you brought it up, if there's a trail of women that are looking to get to know me, like, I don't know who they are. So if you want to like, tell me, like, send them my way.
Oh, they're there. I can promise you they're there.
Yeah.
I can promise you that.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you.
So we've had two random little questions in the chat. I'm just going to ask you real quick. So someone wants to know what you do for work and how old you are. I'm
42. I know most people are thinking I don't look a day over 30. Just kidding.
Yes.
I'm 42.
You're not a day over 38. No, I'm just kidding.
You know what's funny? So just a little, let me tell you, I'll just tell you this real quick. My grandma recently turned 84, and I thought I was being funny. I said, Grandma, you don't look a day over 83. And anyway.
Did she take that?
I'm sure she loved that.
At 84, she probably doesn't care.
She laughed, but I don't know that she appreciated it as much as I did.
Yeah, not as hard as you.
So for work, so I'm a teacher by trade. I taught PE for several years. I've taught special ed in third grade. I had an HR nightmare a few years ago. I got out of PE, went back, started teaching special ed, interviewed for a few PE jobs because that's where I ultimately wanted to end up. When that didn't happen, I said, okay, I'm good here. So I have been unemployed since the summer of 2020. So for a little over a year, I've not taught. So I didn't teach last school year and I'm not teaching this school year. So right now, basically what I'm doing is I own some rental property. I've just been managing those a little bit better than I would if I was working full time. And then I'll pick up odd jobs here and there. Like I've, painted some people's houses and, just different handyman stuff. I eventually, and I've been saying this for a few months, but I've got a buddy in my ward here that has started a mortgage company, and he's been trying so hard to pull me on and help, start selling mortgages. So I might go do that, or I've just kind of enjoyed a little bit of time off and a little time to breathe.
Yeah,
honestly.
He's traveling all over. He's always traveling.
It's been awesome. So yeah, my dad, when he was alive, worked for Delta, and my mom kept those benefits. And so I fly for free. So, I've flown to Arizona to meet women. I've flown to Oregon, just different places, and it hasn't worked out yet, but being able to fly for free is awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I have found that so incredibly healing, these last couple of years after a divorce, where I worked only enough hours at being a therapist to pay my bills, and then a little padding on top of that. But other than that, I mean, I have painted houses. I have done odd jobs. You know, I've bought and sold things online. And I got to tell you, man, I needed that, almost like the diversity of activity, you know, just doing different things, just doing yard work some days, just taking the time to do that rather than drive myself into the ground with a career. And, you know, now I'm just taking a full-time job on again, and it's going to be awesome. But have you noticed, Nathan, kind of the value in just having a little bit of downtime and freedom to kind of choose your way, I guess, choose what the next chapter is going to look like?
It's been awesome. So every once in a while I get a little, I don't know if insecure is the word. I guess insecure would be the word. I get a little insecure. Like, I have no business dating while I'm not working full time, you know, while I'm not contributing, whatever. So I think that holds me back a little bit as far as dating. But then I get this piece that I'm at a spot in my life where, you know, Heavenly Father's fine with me not working full time right this minute type of thing. I'll have the rest of my life to work. So if I'm taking a little bit of time off, you know, I think that's fine. I've had tons of great experiences. Like my aunt who lives in California, I flew out to her house. I hadn't been there for 20 some years. And I was able to help her get a bunch of stuff done. Like, she had a leaky disposal. She had her roof was leaking, like just stuff that took me, you know, I'm going through this list and checking it off every 5 minutes, you know, and stuff that she, you know, was concerned about, whatever. Like, I've been able to do that. My sister, after President Nelson's recent talk, decided to get her to get endowed. And so I was able to go there last week. I flew to Salt Lake, you know, overnight. I was able to do that, you know, different things that if I was working and had used up vacation time or whatever, I wouldn't have been able to do. And so just, you know, it's been a huge blessing to be able to have different type of experiences like that. I helped my mom remodel her bathroom downstairs that was original from the 80s. Like,
Nice.
I've been able to do some things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And so this whole not working thing right now has turned out to be a blessing.
You know, I
mean,
found
it's a
lot
season
of people.
of life.
I'm sorry, John. For whatever reason, we have got a lag and we come in at the same time. I'm sorry, but
It's okay. You go ahead.
I found a lot of people have found a lot of kind of just peace during this COVID time. I know it's been hectic in some ways, but like for me, going into a divorce mid-COVID, I think there was a lot of less stress because life had slowed down quite a bit. And I had time to kind of organize and figure out, you know, where I was going and what I was doing. And I didn't have the hustle and bustle to kind of cause more stress. Now, of course, there was also not the hustle and bustle to take my mind off things, but I don't know. I've heard a lot of people in the singles realm, like, say that COVID has been a benefit that way. Like, it has helped them to slow down their life a little bit, focus on things, take some time off, focus on the family, spend more time, you know, doing what they love. So I'm not surprised that that's something that you've opted to do and that it's been a huge benefit. I think everybody sometimes just needs some time to just focus on themselves and their life and take a step back. Our lives are so crazy and busy. So yeah, I think it's a good choice.
Yeah, it's been a huge blessing. In fact, you know, Celeste, you've been trying to get me on this thing for a couple months now.
It's been a while.
I was not looking forward to it at all, but you know, I'm prayerful and hopeful that whatever is discussed and shared, you know, if we can help even just one person, like, I feel like I've, you know, done something, you know, and that's what I'm kind of after.
Yeah, I agree. That's
I think
every
it
time
already
we
worked.
get on here, we think, hey, if one person can benefit from us coming together and chatting about a topic, then it was worth it. It's all a success. So
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I do have a cure for, you know, if you ever want to get to the point where you have full-time gainful employment again, I can tell you about my prayer a month ago where it was basically, Lord, thanks for the vacation. I mean, thanks for allowing me this time. And I feel like I'm really up to it again. You know, if you want to give me an opportunity, and 2 weeks later, I get an offer. for like this amazing full-time position. And here I go, and it's almost like that now I can see the Lord's hand in kind of giving me that reprieve. But then it's almost like he knows when we're ready for each chapter, I guess you could say.
Yep.
And so your time will come when it's a busier time in your life. And whenever you're ready, and I think the Lord will bless you with that opportunity when it comes. In the meantime, enjoy the downtime and the opportunity to kind of find yourself again.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly how I've kind of felt.
Yeah.
So
go ahead. John. No, you got it.
No, I was just going to ask him another question. I was just going to say, so how have you enjoyed the singles scene this time around? Has it been different from your past single events? I mean, since a lot of things through COVID have become online, and a lot of things, kind of built up that way because no one could really meet face to face. Have you seen any changes, and it's been a benefit to you?
So after my first wife died, I ended up in a singles ward. This is YSA, I'm 28 years old and I'm a widower.
Yeah.
At the time, or 27, I was 27, excuse me. And I'm in this, this YSA ward. And there was a meeting right after church. It's called a mix and mingle or a munch and mingle or whatever they called it. And I had this particular girl gave the gospel doctrine lesson. And I'm like, holy smokes. If somebody doesn't catch her, what's wrong with, I'm looking around at all these guys like this girl, if people aren't asking her out, there's something wrong with these men. So I end up learning a huge lesson. I just went for it. I asked her out at a table of like 10 of us. And it was like in the movies, like when all of a sudden when something happens and the music stops and all eyes turn, like I learned real quick that if you ask somebody out, you don't do it in front of a group of people. So I learned that right away. But the second time around, like I remember my first, it was a singles conference here in, I believe it was Irving at the time or something like that. And so I went down to this singles conference and I'd only been divorced a short time. And I just remember, I just about wanted to put my head in my hands and think, this is really what my future holds. Like this is it. And so it was really, really hard transition. I didn't feel like I could relate to anyone there. Anyway, it was pretty eye opening and it was just hard to swallow. So, nothing has been like I anticipated, but, now I'm able to look back and just laugh and everything's fun. I'm finally in a place where I'm secure that, I'm, whatever happens, whatever the Lord wants with me, that's what I want. I want to be on that train because, if I got what I wanted, it'd probably never turn out right.
I think all of us kind of feel that way, right? Like we put in our like order. Okay, this is what we want. This is what I want. I want it back. And I don't think very often at all it comes back exactly how we ordered it. Because I think the Lord recognizes like we're a little short-sighted or we don't have all the knowledge we need to place a correct order. So yeah, it's always a little different than what we maybe first.
I remember the first time attending a singles activity because I took a break for a little bit from the church and I attended a singles activity and I was thinking, maybe my marriage isn't so bad. I was like, take me back.
Yes.
I said that out loud. I'm just going to.
Do you know, I still have never gone to like a church related singles activity. Still haven't done one. I've done some volleyball just with a group of LDS singles. But
that's different. Yeah, you need to step into that building and report back to me.
I hear it's crazy, but
no, it's not. It's fabulous. Yes, it's great. It's great.
I do. I at least have to go to one singles dance just to say that I've been there.
Yes.
So I'll show.
Yes. Got to try it once. So Nathan, based on what you said, it brought up a scripture that was in the lesson I taught today, and it was about the Lord saying, you cannot see right now my hand in your life. You cannot. And in a way, it was almost like, I don't expect you to, but someday you will. Someday you'll look back on your life and you'll know all the different ways that I guided you through all these things, and probably know what the alternatives would have been if we had gotten our way, or if we had, which could be that we either avoided the adversity or that we went into even darker adversity. And it sounds like you have learned that valuable lesson that God's been in the blank spaces between sentences in your story, basically.
Absolutely. And there was a scripture that was pointed out to me years ago in First Nephi, I believe it's 16 or 17 or somewhere in there, where the Lord tells Nephi, when you arrive in the promised land, you'll look back, basically, I'm paraphrasing, I'm butchering it, but basically you'll look back and see that my hand was in your life the entire time, even when your brothers tied you up, all those things. And, I've started to get to that point where looking back, I'm like, I hate saying that. It's even hard for me to say now, but I actually am kind of grateful for my trials. Like, I'm getting to that point where it's like, there's no way I would have learned the things that I would not be the person that I've become had it not been for the trials that I went through. And so my grandma, I don't know where she got this, a famous saying of hers for the last several years is, if all of our trials were in the middle of a room and we were all told to go grab some trials, we would fight tenaciously to get the trials that that were for us, right?
That are ours already. Yeah.
Yeah. I look around and I see people that struggle with disabilities or, mental illness, different things. And I'm like, man, I would not take that on for anything. I'm like, I'll stick with my trials, as crappy as I think they are. I'd much rather that than these other things, And
I think I think that Heavenly Father, like when I got slammed upside the head with the situation I dealt with, like, if you would have even asked me like a week prior, whatever, Les, do you think you could handle this situation? If I had some advance notice, I would have been like, there's no way, there is no way I can handle all that. But it's interesting, we would look at other people's trials and we think there's no way I'd want to do it. And I'm in the same boat. I would be grabbing my own trials 100%. But I almost have to think that if the Lord allowed those trials to enter into our lives, that he would, if we turn to him, he would be the strength to help us through those trials. And we would be like, dang, look at me. I made it through somehow. Don't know how, but I made it through. I'm stronger than I thought I was. And I've got all this experience and knowledge now that is priceless. Again, wouldn't want to do it again, but there is benefit to it. And I think that we cut ourselves short and we say, I couldn't never deal with that. But you know what? I think if we have the Lord by our side, we can pretty much do anything. We wouldn't want to do it, but we can. I think that he is there and he would support us and direct us. And yeah. But anyway, I don't think any of us I did not think I could make it through all this, but we did, somehow.
I think too, if not only the looking back, but if we realize, I really believe in the law of compensation. And I think that, the day will come when we have the opposite of those trials. Like, we really are blessed in the exact precise ways that we struggled. And, I almost can already anticipate how joyful that's going to be, and so whatever you felt you were deprived of in a previous marriage, you'll have that and then some in whether it's in this life or the next, in that ultimate marriage. And if you had struggles in your relationship with your kids, those things will be healed. If you have challenges related to your work or your career, you'll never want again at some point, and so I'm really looking forward to that too, So one, the problems weren't as bad as I thought they were. And the solutions, the blessings that are coming are like 100 times better than I can imagine right now. So did you kind of find some of that hope too, Nathan, as you were going through all this? Did you start to realize that, that, like Celeste said, that maybe all this book reading and this preparation to be a better husband, maybe that's for another relationship someday where I'll already be ahead of the game because of the trials I went through in my previous relationships?
I really believe that wholeheartedly. I think, the more, they say knowledge is power. I think the more you understand about relationships, the more you understand about communication, all those types of things, the better you are equipped to handle situations. One of my favorite authors is Andy Andrews, and he talks about, there's a book he wrote called The Noticer. And he talks about, it's basically this guy who notices things. And he sees this couple sitting at this restaurant, and he can tell that they're both there, they're trying to get into each other, but there's hurt and there's all these things that there's boundaries up, all this stuff. And he basically helps them both to notice, what means love to you does not necessarily mean love to him. Like, this girl felt like her husband didn't love her because the outside of their house looked like it hadn't been seen yard work in months, those type of things. And she grew up where her dad was great at yard work, and that's how you show love for your spouse, is by doing yard work and whatever. And he didn't grow up that way. And so she thinks that she's unloved, and nothing could have been further from the truth, but it was just a simple misunderstanding. And I think a lot of times communication clears up those misunderstandings and helps us understand that, in my household, like, I watched my dad pace the house. When he knew my mom was coming home, he would pace the house. He was so excited when my mom got home. And, it looked a little needy, a little clingy, whatever, but he loved being around my mom. He was excited when she came home. And so, if I marry somebody that's not like that, pacing the house and excited when I come home, if that's an expectation that I have, I can either sit and pout and think that I'm not loved, or I can bring it to my spouse's attention and say, hey, it'd really mean a lot to me if you would just drop everything for 5 minutes, come check in with me, say hello when I come home, and meet me at the door and make me feel like I'm, missed or whatever. If that's important to me, important that I explain that and I own that expectation, rather than, assuming that I'm unloved and going off and pouting or whatever. That's not healthy.
Right. I love that. Yeah. And those are just some of and those examples actually will work with healthy people. If we communicate well with healthy people will learn from that and want to do better. If we're open with people will, they tend to take that well. And I think that's still the majority of people, but yeah, it's a lot of us have been through trials with people who are the minority of people who've been through their own problems and not been able to overcome them. And so it's gonna, backfire sometimes when we try to do those healthy things. That's what I'm looking forward to. Can I just be healthy with you and you take it as healthy, and or if you don't, we can at least work it out, kind of thing. So
yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that.
All right, I have got a question. Nathan, are you open to a long distance relationship?
So that's a good question. I am open to a long distance relationship, absolutely. But it's like I even put this on my mutual profile. I can't move away from my kids. So I'm open to a long distance thing. I could fly out, we could court a lot, I could do that often, whatever. But I can't, there's no way, like, I can't think of a woman that's wonderful enough for me to leave my kids. Does that make sense? And maybe I'm, I just feel like I need to be the rock for my kids, especially, they're not getting the gospel in the other house at all. And so I've never felt like the Lord would ever ask me to move away from them. Again, I don't want to limit God. If I would have to be hit with lightning to understand I needed to move away, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So,
Right.
I think
as a child that has been left by fathers, I think that's fabulous.
yeah.
I think a woman who ever would ask a guy to move away from their children, I don't know. That's questionable to me.
And that's the
I
other
was going to say the same thing.
Like what you're saying now is, and then people also ask me, well, would you want another blended family where you marry a woman that already has 3, 4, 5 kids, whatever? And it's like, yes, but to me, that kind of limits the long distance thing, because I don't want to pull those kids away from their dad either. Not only am I not moving, but I can't imagine asking somebody, hey, by the way, pack up everything, tell your ex that he's not going to see the kids till Christmas, whatever, and move on down here type of thing. And, so it gets hard. It gets sticky. I think if it's right, the Lord's going to make it work, and he's going to make it, all that. It'll be way better than we can imagine if the Lord wants it. But, it's just, with kids, it makes it hard, cause I don't want to take kids away from the dad,
Well, I think that's fabulous, again, that you would consider the children, because I wasn't considered. And so I'm very sensitive to that subject. I'm very, I'm just very sensitive. I think that children sometimes get lost in the mix of all of this. And sometimes we get so caught up in what we want as a couple or an individual, that we don't consider the kids. So anyway, I think it's fabulous. I just want to throw that out there. So.
And my kids were abandoned by their dad. So no.
Not good.
Not a good thing.
No.
Nathan, it just makes us love you even more. So
I don't know if I'm all that lovable, but thank you.
Well, my love really doesn't matter much, but there's others out there that, I'm sure it makes a difference. So we're probably are we getting close to that time when we're going to open up for questions a little more?
Yeah, I just put it in there. So if anybody else out there wants to participate in our audience participation section, please just raise your hand. You can ask any of us a question. If you want to ask one directly to Nathan, that's fine too. If you want to come on and make a comment, it's open. Just if you are willing or wanting to participate, come on, just raise your hand. We'll bring you in.
And if you ask us an uncomfortable question, we may just have internet trouble.
We may just have to accidentally boot you on accident.
That's how Celeste do it.
Oops.
I'm like, whoa, look at the time. Internet trouble.
Adios. Okay. So while we're waiting, let's just kind of wrap up this resilience thing. So to put it in a nutshell, what are each of your guys' opinion on what have you done as individuals to be resilient during all of your trials? Because I think all of us have got like basketfuls of trials that we've been through to where we're at now. So what did you do to become resilient? We'll start with Nathan.
I think mainly just, again, temple attendance and praying and begging the Lord and getting to the point. I got serious with a girl, a couple of 3 years ago. And she basically taught me, like, tell the Lord off, tell him how you're feeling. He's, you don't have to always approach him like, you're on eggshells. Tell him what's going on in your mind and your heart. Just get it out. And that, I think,
anyway,
that was huge for me and great advice. And so I think, again, the Book of Mormon, I can't say enough about the Book of Mormon either. Like, if you want to heal, if you want to change, if you want to become, get your nose in the Book of Mormon. I have not found a better way, than studying the scriptures, like, diving into it. Again, temple attendance, prayer, the primary answers, like, they're primary answers because they are primary. That's,
the basic.
They're not secondary.
Yep. I agree. So really quick, just to go off of your Book of Mormon thing, years ago when I was struggling with infertility and a lot of other things were going on, but I really struggled, and I became severely depressed and anxious, and I kind of had like social anxiety and things like that. Anyway, it was really overwhelming. And I knew that the Lord could heal me. I knew it without a doubt. And I prayed nonstop for him to just kind of take away all of this. I felt kind of crazy. I felt like I couldn't think straight. Everything was just so overwhelming. And I just wanted him to make me whole. I just prayed for healing over and over and over again. I probably a couple years, and it just never came. But I was faithful. I was like, I know you can do this. I know you can do it. So I would just kept dealing with the the situations I would deal with, and then I would just pray again, please help me, because I had a lot of random things I dealt with. But anyway, the point is that at one point, the Lord kept sending me the impression to read the Book of Mormon. And I hadn't been really steady in doing that because I was dealing with my emotional struggles. But I was like, Heavenly Father, I'm fine. My spirituality is even stronger because I know you can heal me. Like, I know you can do this. I am fine, like, spiritually. I don't need to be reading the scriptures, right? So I kid you not. He told me that probably 3 or 4 times in a row. Like, it was very strong feeling. Just pick up the Book of Mormon and start reading. And every time I'm like, you don't get it. Like, I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't need more help with my, religious part or my spirituality or my testimony or anything. One day I was like, fine, like, whatever. You win, Lord. I'll pick up the Book of Mormon. I'll start reading. All like stubborn in my early 20s, that's how it gets. And I kid you not, I swear to you, from the first moment I picked up and started reading, it was still a slow process, but every day it was a gradual progression in a positive direction. And I hadn't done anything different than to read the Book of Mormon. And by the time I got through the first time through at that moment, I was doing so much better. And it did take me probably, because I struggled with those. I probably struggled for about 4 or 5 years, but it probably took me about that length of time to come full circle and come back to who I was at the beginning. But again, what changed me was reading the Book of Mormon. So I'm just going to throw that out there. So I support you with that. Ellis, Nathan,
Right.
Ellis. Anyway, okay. Side note on that. Anyway,
Thank you for sharing that, Celeste.
Thank you. Terry, did you want to answer the what you do?
Oh gosh, my soul's black. I have no heart.
That's true. We all know that.
Yeah, that helps.
We just saw the tears. There's no way.
Way to call me out. I think blind faith,
Just
blind
believing.
faith. Yeah.
It'll be okay.
And running, lots of running. Just kidding.
Hey, that's therapeutic. I think sometimes that blind faith, just knowing, even if you don't know how you're going to get from A to Z, but knowing that you can get there, like, and believing it, like, that's more powerful than, okay, I'm going to go through the steps of praying and, all this stuff. Like, I think sometimes just that.
And just an understanding, where you just find that common ground where you're like, okay, I get this. I get why I'm going through this. I get it. So, yeah.
All right. Okay, John, you're here right in time. It's your turn.
Oh, I
Look
just
at
try
the
to
time.
practice what I teach, man. Just, the same stuff I share in therapy. It's like I'm doing therapy with myself, and at night, sometimes I'll look in the mirror and just go, dude, think about what you talked about with your clients today. Let that sink in, let it help you in your own life. That's one of the greatest gifts you can give people you're trying to help, is let the same skills help you. And definitely scripture study, temple was a little harder with COVID-19, obviously, for most of us. But I could just rattle them off, nature, just getting out there. My little dog here, he came in handy when I was going through COVID and you're living alone. All your kids are grown and you're divorced and living in a house alone. And then I think too, just reaching out to other people, not sitting around on your butt, waiting for everybody to come and love you. How about you go out and love people yourself, and then you'll find it comes back to you tenfold, and so that was a huge part of my learning experience, and that included church. And that includes sitting there and feeling a little bit lonely, but remembering that it's between you and Jesus, not you and them. I think that's always blessed my life. I made those covenants with Christ, not with my fellow members. Anything my members do for me, I consider that a beautiful bonus. But church is about me and my relationship with God. So I think that helped me through too.
One of the things that I find really therapeutic is journaling. I don't know what it is about writing, but me and my journal are BFFs when I'm going through a difficult time.
Yep.
And it's interesting that when I start an entry where I'm at versus at the end of the entry where I'm at, and maybe you, John, understand like what process that does to our brain. I don't know what it is, but it's interesting that as I'm writing, sometimes I'm figuring it out as I go
Yeah.
along. I'll be like, oh, I just realized da 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 or whatever. Like I mean, I do write a lot, but I swear to you, by the time I'm done, I feel so much better from when I began. And I don't know why, but I think it's priceless for me. Why does that work, John? Do you know why?
Well, I think whenever well, it depends. It depends on how the conversation goes. If the conversation is really dwelling on the past or worrying about the future or trying to control other people, it'll make it worse. But if we're journaling and we're trying to put everything in perspective and we're just really focused on ourselves in the here and now, yeah, that can be incredibly healing. And I think the same can be said with conversations with ourselves and also conversations with trusted people, like healthy people. Not necessarily people who are going to commiserate with us on everything that's wrong with our lives.
So-
And that's one of the benefits of therapy too. It's almost like having a sounding board where you can share it and have someone come back with a healthy way to cope with it,
So it's funny, you actually just sparked a memory for me, John, when you said talking to yourself. So I journal as well sometimes. It just helps me kind of sort out my thoughts and sort out like what I'm actually truly feeling. But my son one time had come to me and was like, well, how do you deal with this? How do you sort out your emotions and how to figure things out? And I told him, I said, you have to figure out what works for you. For me, it's journaling. Well, a couple days later, I heard him in the shower and I was like, what is going on? And he's like, I'm going to fight you. I'm going to fight you. He was like 12 and he was talking to himself in the shower on how to handle these kids at school. And I was like, this is not what I had in mind.
Actually, I think that's incredibly helpful. I think that's awesome.
Funny. It was just funny. It was entertaining for me because I'm at the door and he's like, yeah, that's it. You take that. I'm going to fight you.
Yeah. Give yourself a pep talk.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because every time my oldest daughter, I always encourage her, hey, just write, grab a journal, start writing. And she's like, Mom, I'm not like you. But
Yeah.
she has to speak it. I can hear her in her room. She's talking to herself. She's mad. She's angry. She's spouting off. And I'll be peeking in like, who are you talking to? And that's what she does to process. She will literally talk for hours or scream for hours or get annoyed at whoever. Like, it's like she visualizes it and she just lets it out. And that's what works for her. So it's amazing. Like, I'm like, I write, you talk. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and it's
right.
interesting too, because it was a different perspective. Because he actually told me one of the reasons why, because I never really asked him, but finally, like a year later of him having this battle in the shower, I finally asked him, I was like, what are you doing in there? And he's like, I'm just talking about my day that was so frustrating. And he goes, I don't want to write it down because writing just isn't what I want to do. He's like, but at the same time, I would feel terrible if when my friends saw what I wrote about them.
Right.
I was like,
that's true. I
yeah,
mean, there is validity to that. There's no paper trail. Okay.
Right.
Looks like we have a hand. Jenna, you can come on, turn on your audio and video if you'd like and ask a question or say a comment.
Oh, okay. So,
hey, Jenna, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
So I was just wondering, like, if some people's tools changed after marriage, because, like, I guess for me, when people are always talking, like, how did you deal with getting divorced and things like that, I'm like, I kind of already had tools. Like, I had already been through crazy stuff before my divorce, and so I was just wondering, like, were a lot of people, I don't know, I don't know if my question is making any sense, but like, did your tools change or did you like just go back to, or did you already have a bucket of tools?
Are you talking about like how we approach situations? Like,
yeah, because like, I guess for me, like divorce is a big trial, but like, it's not like I haven't had trials. And so like, it's not like, shoot, I should have got all my work together before I raised
Well,
my.
I can
think
give
it
you a
was
quick
trying
answer to
to-
that. For me, I don't think my answers changed that much, but they worked better because I wasn't in that constant drama and emotional drain of that toxic relationship. And so, even I was left pretty devastated, but what I realized is just consistently over time, as I did all the things we've talked about in the previous answer, now they're really healing me because they're not competing against damage. Does that make sense? It's almost like you can put a Band-Aid on something, you can put all kinds of salve on it, you can take care of it. But if you keep ripping the Band-Aid off and rubbing dirt on it, you're just, that wound is going to remain sore for indefinitely. So once I stopped getting dirt rubbed on my wound and just kept doing the things I kept trying to do to survive in that existence, it healed great. And what I learned was those skills were all valuable the whole time. They probably kept it from getting more devastating, at the time. It prevented further damage, but yeah, it was amazing how fast I was able to start healing after getting out of that situation.
How about you, Nathan? Did you find that
Well-
your coping mechanisms changed after dealing with your divorces? Or
Absolutely. I think, again, my temple attendance was pretty sporadic before, but once I've discovered peace and those type of things going, like I went a lot, and that changed me. I think reading things and discovering new ways to approach relationships and those things, it gave me hope. I'm not so, I'm not an outlier. Like, I'm actually pretty normal for a guy, I'm not the only guy that doesn't, that only likes to say 7,000 words a day, or likes to, can't wait till the next time he can clean the floor, or, whatever. Like, I find that I'm quite normal. And so that to me has really helped cope with, different trials, and even like when I look at myself and say, what do I need to work on or fix, it makes me realize that, obviously there's room for change all the time.
Focus on
But
what
I
you
can
really
be-
need to fix. Yeah.
I can be happy with where I'm at, basically, and be content with where I'm at in my journey. And, that gives me a lot of peace. And so I think, running, like somebody mentioned running, I hate running, but I find if I play racquetball, or if I go play pickleball, or if I go, whatever, even if I go to the gym and just throw some weight around or whatever, it's really therapeutic to be sure.
absolutely. I found that for me, because stress kind of makes my OCD like intensify. So like in the middle of like the divorce and all of that, I found myself with a lot of reoccurring things that I was doing to kind of make myself more comfortable and just feel more calm. But I've noticed post-divorce, and I did go through like 4.5 years of therapy, which is, we definitely want to throw that in there. That was one of the things that definitely helped me. But
Yay for that.
afterward, after I've noticed, like, I feel like I can use a lot of the coping mechanisms that I was taught in therapy a lot better now because I'm not being triggered by the stress. And so I found a lot of the things that I do, such as writing and listening to certain songs, or, I like to do art and things like that. Like, I find it much more enjoyable now, and it makes me feel good just to do it, versus I used to do it almost like I had to do it because it was kind of part of my OCD loop. So I don't know if mine have actually changed, but I use them differently, and they make me feel calmer now versus prior to my divorce. So mine's totally different because I got OCD. So my answer is going to be a little odd, but did you get your answer, Jenna?
I think so.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on and asking. We appreciate it. Is there anybody else that has a question or comment?
I'll just add to Jenna's. Mine has changed quite a bit. I don't write things down as much. if at all. I set, again, just blind faith, and I set goals for myself on how to get through it and to achieve it just as I do within my life. And it's personal goals, and I have room. If I don't achieve it, or if I don't hit that goal, then okay, it's not the end of the world. But the biggest thing that I really try to remember is I always try to be kind to myself. So that's the big thing. Even though sometimes I don't sound like it, I promise I do try to be kind.
That's what I was going to say earlier too, is you can tell someone who's been gaslit, because one of the biggest signs of healing is they learn to differentiate between what are the weaknesses in me that have been put as labels on me by other people, and what are the ones that are legit that I actually need to overcome. And, you know, you find that there's plenty to deal with. I have plenty of weaknesses to overcome that are legit and that I really need to overcome. I needed to learn to let go of, you know, all of the crud, all of these thoughts that were put into my mind about what a loser I was. And really realize that, hey, I'm doing the best I can with what I know. And I was never as bad as they said I was at my worst. And I was better than they would give me credit for at my best. Are there things I needed to overcome? Absolutely. And that's where I'll turn my attention now. I can handle my own weaknesses, you know, and learn how to overcome them. But when I get told that I'm 10 times worse than I am, that's when it just becomes unmanageable and I start to really tank. And so that's been one of the healthiest things for me too, is these 2 years have just been great for me to realize here's some stuff you can work on, stay humble. You know, you really aren't perfect. There are things you need to do better. My bigger issue was I'm not only not perfect, I'm not good enough for anybody. And that part, that toxic shame just had to get flushed out of my system, basically.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I was gaslit a lot too. I do think that the therapy helped me recognize, maybe, because I took it all. I thought I was to blame for everything at the beginning. I was like, I am like useless. I'm like just a complete failure. But it's interesting, like you said, once I started being able to recognize, that's not really me. That's just a label that someone's given me, versus, okay, yeah, that's probably something I need to work on. It does. It like lightens the load. You're like, okay, I'm not some crazy person as all these things wrong with me. I do have obviously faults, but they're more manageable when they're not so large and so like consuming. So yeah, I can definitely see that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
And I think also, I don't know, Whitney used to be on here as a host, and she used to always say that she would write messages on the mirror to herself. And this kind of goes off of what Terry was just saying, that you need to be kind to yourself. And I've kind of instituted that. In fact, I've got some written around my room right now. And I try to put things in an eternal perspective, because I think sometimes we get caught up in the here and now, and it's hard. It's hard to kind of see our way through it if we're right in the middle of it. But if we take a long view, we can kind of see, okay, by the time I get there, things will be better. And so I kind of try to leave little notes about, you know, take a higher view, take a longer view, just so that you can see beyond the here and now. So that does help me as well.
Yeah. And I think sometimes for me, not necessarily the writing the messages on the mirror or anything, because my kids would probably get really annoyed with that. But I wake up in the morning and I just think, what is one kind thing that I can think about myself today? And then what is one thing I want to accomplish today? And, I try to make it realistic. I try to make it simple. And I also allow for mistakes, and because perfection, I'm not striving to be perfect at all. I don't want to be perfect.
Well, we can't be. So
no, it's impossible.
It's a hard thing to try to attain when it's impossible.
Yes, but there are a lot of people that try that. So I would just rather just be real and be honest with myself, and just say, okay, what's the one thing that I want to accomplish today for myself? And
that brings up something for me that I think we talked about when Nathan was talking about the, not having to go work a 40-hour-a-week job and just focusing on paying your bills, but also like healing. And I remember days where it took everything I had to just do one thing.
Yeah.
Just today, just do one thing that'll get you closer to a goal that you have in your life or something like that. And then I wouldn't beat myself up because I say, oh my gosh, the only thing I did today was, send out those applications, or the only thing I did today was, get my car fixed, or the only thing, and it's just like, no. Just keep moving. Just keep moving in that direction. You're going to be okay. Nathan, did you notice that like during this time when you haven't been, working full time in the last year and a half, have you felt that kind of that idea that if I can just accomplish one thing today, or even if I don't accomplish anything, but I just heal more,
Right.
can that be good enough?
Yeah, I think for me, most of the healing honestly came before my little year and a half stint of not working. But
Got it.
but I have, not to say that I'm not healing every day now, but I think, the majority of that came before. And, anyway, I just, just tried to focus on what I need to do every day to become better, to, prepare myself for marriage again, those type of things. And I think wanting to change and constantly improving is, it is important. If you don't have a purpose, if you don't have something to get up for in the morning, life can sure be depressing. And that's, when I was going through my divorce, I was so depressed and like you said, there's days if you got out of bed, you did something well, like that there, when you're in survival mode, if you get out of bed and leave the house and, wave to somebody, if that's what you can do that day, then that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I had days like that. I remember when I first got separated and even a year through, like the first couple years of divorce, there was times where I would take my kids right after sacrament meeting straight to primary. They were both in primary at the time. And I would literally, there was a little, I don't know what you call it, unisex bathroom in the back, and I would literally walk in there, lock the door, and I would collapse on the floor and just weep and just, watching the clock like, oh boy, I hope nobody, I'd hear someone try to get in every once in a while and what's going on in there, or whatever. But, I didn't even I just needed to get it all out for that hour while I didn't have my kids. And so I could be strong for them, then when I saw them again type of thing. And so yeah, I totally get.
Man, I can totally relate to that. I remember the first winter after my divorce, my most recent divorce, and I was living in a mother-in-law apartment of a friend because I had spent everything to pay off my debt to her. And so I'm living like paycheck to paycheck, and there was no central heating in the apartment. And I remember one night it was 5 degrees outside and 35 degrees in my apartment. The only time I was warm was either in the shower or in bed, like under blankets. And I did not have a heater at that Christmas. My mom bought me a heater, a space heater, so that I could at least warm up my little room, And I remember thinking to myself during those dark days, and it was dark too, like there weren't many lights in the apartment. And I remember thinking to myself, these days, Lord, just help me get out of bed in the morning and get dressed and make my bed.
Yeah.
And anything else I can do for the rest of the day, I would have to go to my office, to get warm, to warm up. Even if I didn't have therapy, I would go there just to warm up and read books and study the scriptures and whatever. And some of those days I patted myself on the back for getting out of bed and going to work, or just getting out of bed and getting dressed. So
yeah, I think there's something to be said to get up out of bed. And like for me, it was feed the kids, make sure the kids are taken care of. I didn't care what I looked like. Up and be the mom. I had to do the
get them to
basics.
school.
And it was like, I've successfully done something today. So yeah, I think we all relate. I mean, it's this whole being single at this age is tough. I'm not even going to lie. And I don't think it was how Heavenly Father would ever have wanted any of our lives to be, but it is what it is, and agency is what it is.
But hey, I'm not complaining though. Like, I'm sure appreciating all that I have now compared
Yeah,
to
we can
then.
learn from it. We learn.
And yeah, I have come, I think all of us, if we really look at it, have come so far.
Yeah.
From those darkest days,
I agree.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Nathan, did you want to say something else before we end?
Oh no, I just agree. I do want to say something though before we end. I'm looking right now. There's like 298 comments, and I've seen a couple flash through my screen every once in a while. But if something was directed at me and I didn't answer it, please understand that I cannot multitask, and it's not because I'm snobby or don't want to answer anybody. I just cannot multitask. So if I start answering questions on a chat, I'm not going to hear what's going on. I'll be so lost. It'll look anyway.
No,
just want to throw that out there.
The chat is its own little beat.
To a healthy woman, you are still lovable. Despite that.
No, like the chat is always like its own little healthy little thing going on, and most of the time it doesn't include us.
Or unhealthy, but
that's true.
It's usually me just instigating stuff,
Yeah, Terry likes to be in there and stir the pot a little bit about tacos. She loves tacos. But any question that was directed to you, I did ask. So you got all your questions. So
good.
Anyway, we are so grateful you are here with us, Nathan. We appreciate it. And
thank you.
I think this has been a fabulous discussion, and I know that we've had a lot of positive comments in the chat. So I'm just grateful you're willing to be open about your life and what you've experienced. And I have no doubt that far more than one person benefited from this. So I appreciate you finally coming on.